All right, let's get into it, team. And first topic, we want to have a look at the performance of the government. We always tend to focus on Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins, but in fact, there's a whole cabinet of ministers. And I was just looking back at the ratings that the CEOs of the country had given the ministers of the Crown. This was back in September, and top of the pops was Erica Stanford, the Minister of Education. Winston did very well. This is out of 5, by the way. So it's not a fail mark. And Chris Bishop did well. Todd McClay, Mark Mitchell, and then there was Simeon Brown, Health, Judith Collins, Defence, Brooke Van Velden, Workplace Relations, although I don't think she'd be quite as popular now with the old pay equity thing. Shane Jones, who's just good for a laugh, and Chris Pink, who actually isn't even in, is that right, Simon? He's not even in cabinet, is he? So he's doing pretty well. And there was one more. The interesting thing was that the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister weren't even in the top 10. So I'm interested to hear from you as a panel. Which ministers have stood out to you and which have been duds? Brendan Senior in the home of the duddiest premier that has ever been. And I won't tell you whether I'm talking about the current one or the last one. Anyway, any ministers of the Crown that have stood out to you in the last 2 years?
I think interesting enough for me, I think Simeon Brown really has stood out quite strongly, and he's a minister who's had a couple of different major portfolios and done well in both, which I think, to his credit. I think Erica Stanford with education, and I'm hearing from a lot of educators, even people who have previously been sort of not so much pro-national, they actually quietly in the background say they like her. And lastly, I do think Mark Mitchell, because of what the police have been through, he seems to have been a pretty steady hand, actually. So they really, really stick out for me.
Okay, I'll come back to you and ask if there's been any duds. Let's just go around and do the strengths. Sue, which ones are standouts for you?
Yeah, I agree with Brendan. Were you saying cabinet? Because I took it to mean so Casey Costello is a real standout for me for portfolios, and she just she won't give up. She takes a lot of crap from a lot of women actually in question time, and she's just relentless. She just won't give up. And of course, I love what Karen Chor is doing. Chris Pink, I love what he's doing with defence. And Nicole McKee, she's being a rural area here. We love what she's doing for our rural community. But I'd also agree with what Brendan said as well. They're my standouts.
Okay, so it's interesting. You've picked three out of 4 are women, and the 3 are from the minor parties. What is it? Two from ACT and 1 from New Zealand First, I think.
That's right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. It is a bit hard to sort of, I guess Erica Stanford and there's a lot of people doing those good, consistent jobs. They are doing, working with their portfolios in a consistency and doing well. But for the standouts and for Casey Costello's speech on Benjamin Doyle was an absolute standout for me. That's just who she is. She makes a stand.
Yeah. Okay. And the reason we're asking this is it's just over 2 years since the current crop of ministers were sworn in. So they've had 2 years to prove themselves. Some have, some aren't. I'll come back to the ones that haven't for you, Sue. Simon, any standouts from your perspective?
In no particular order, I think Erica Stanford has actually done a really good job in education. I mean, it's only a short sample, but the structured mathematics in the last 6 months is showing really positive signs, and she stood her ground against relentless attacks. Look, I would include Chris Luxon. I mean, his particular performance on topics in general hasn't been good, but he's actually held this coalition partnership together. I think Winston's done a good job in foreign affairs. I mean, it's his natural space. I'd echo Sue. I think actually Nicole McKee and Karen Chor have actually done a really good job. I mean, Casey, there's a few questions I'd have around the whole smoking lobby, but overall they've held their ground. I'd actually say a big shout out to Simeon, as in Brown. I mean, he's held big portfolios and changing halfway through, which most of the ministers haven't yet, to pivot from transport, which basically the current minister, Chris Bishop's doing a good job, but Chris is basically inheriting all the work that Simeon did, and now Simeon's in health. And the last one is Chris Pink. I mean, he's not in cabinet, but he's pretty much one of the most consistent deliverers of government policy, which firstly makes sense, and also the people understand. He's made the whole building area in particular much more straightforward. So no, kudos to those guys. I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, and look, could you just explain, because you made that point about Simeon, a lot of people forget that he was Minister of Transport for the first year, lots of changes. He got rid of a whole lot of judder bars, or speed humps as I call them. He put speed limits back to normal speed limits. So there was a whole lot of good stuff. And then he's actually only been the Minister of Health for the last, 12 months. So he's really still getting his feet under the desk, isn't he?
He is. Look, health is a notoriously difficult area because no matter where you focus your attention, there's always going to be more problems. But look, he threw himself into transport. He actually cleared out a lot of the dead wood, reorganized things, basically got bureaucrats that were a problem out of the way. So a lot of what you're seeing happening currently in transport is actually Simeon's work. And I'm sure, I don't know this, but I'm sure it would have been very frustrating to have had to hand all that work over and then move into a whole area, which, is probably not his area of expertise, to be fair on Simeon. He's not a health guy, but he's doing what he can. He's regained the narrative. If very, very quickly, Shane Retty, for all his qualities, lost control of the portfolio. Simeon has it back in control now. You don't have to agree with everything. We can admit there's still problems in the health sector, but there's always going to be. So no, he's done well. Oh, and by the way, had another child in between, child number 4, so just a few stresses.
That's excellent. Doing his bit for the fertility rate and going forth and multiplying. So well done. Michael, which ones get kudos from you?
Oh, well, look, I agree with the others by and large, Bob. I think Winston is the senior statesman of this government, and particularly in the foreign affairs area, he's done very well. He's got the tenacity and the longevity of his World War II namesake. And in terms of domestic issues, the things that are important to most Family First supporters, I think he's been very good. Shane Jones is, as somebody said, is good for a laugh. He's a counter-puncher, I think, in the mould of Longy and Muldoon, but he's staunch. He hangs in there, and he's not afraid to take it to his dissenters. I like that. Simeon Brown, of course, as everyone's mentioned, he's young, but he's all over his portfolios. He's a hard worker, and he gets things done. And that speed limit changes and getting rid of bumps. I know he's committed to getting rid of road cones. Perhaps hasn't quite succeeded there, but in the health area, of course, probably one of the toughest portfolios. Erica Stanford, she's articulate. She's probably woke, I think, deep down, but she's a good political operator, and she's not afraid to take it to the entrenched teacher unions, which is really good. Mark Mitchell, he's a straight shooter. He seems to be in touch with public opinion, and he's got kudos because he's had first-hand experience in policing. And he always fronts for the media, Bob, which is really good.
Yeah.
So,
he seems to like the media, and they like him, that's for sure. All right, let's just check some of the comments, the votes from the public. Murray says Judith Collins is, we haven't got on to duds, Murray, but that's okay. You can get one in early. Judith Collins is a big dud for me. Simeon is the leader. Leslie says, yep, agree with Casey's speech. It was a very good speech. Christine says, I can't think of a weak ACT MP. Most of New Zealand First are pretty good. Also, Chris Bishop also has my attention, particularly his attempts at making housing affordable. Donna Marie says, health is a mess. But Rosie says, well, he's, hang on, what's that referring to? I can, and he still doesn't know what a woman is. Who doesn't know what a woman is? That's got to be Chris Hipkins, is it? Anyway, sorry, Rosie, I'm not sure who you're referring to there. Nancy Margaret says, they gave Simeon a very hard job. I think he's great. Sorted transport, now health. Agree with Sue's comments. Rosie says, that's not Simeon's fault. Labor woefully underfunded it for the 6 years they were in government. Blame Labor. Kiwi Toffee also says, Simeon learning fast on the job. Here we are. Kirstine says, who from ACT doesn't know what a woman is? Well, okay, we might ask them. That'll be interesting. Leslie says, yes to Shane, more intelligent and astute than one would assume. I mean, that was an interesting thing about Shane Retty. I agree with you, Simon. Dr. Shane Retty is a lovely man. He's a doctor, and yet he really struggled in the health portfolio, which it shows that often is the job necessarily about your personal qualifications? Like, do you always put the person that's got the qualifications in that portfolio, or are you really just looking for people with political nous who can take on the policy wonks, lefties in Wellington?
I think it's a mixture of that. I mean, unfortunately, I think for some ministers, I'm not just referring to Shane here, it's not being able to see the forest for the trees. They get captured. Secondly, ministers don't need to be experts in their particular area. You don't have to be a doctor to run health. You don't have to be a transport expert to be, well, the transport minister, nor in defence or whatever else. You just need to be able to make decisions. You're surrounded by experts, and your skill, if you will, is to be able to take that information, distill it, and decide. It's as simple as that. And that was something which I think, unfortunately for Shane, was lacking. He was getting too stuck in the weeds, whereas Simeon is just a much more swift political operator. And Winston's another good example of that. You know, the contrary is someone like Mark Mitchell. Obviously, he's been on the front line with police, but he's able to step back from that, if you will, personal experience and go, right, what am I being told? What are the options? Let's make the decision.
Yeah. Okay, the duds, the ones that maybe have disappointed you or have just been downright useless. Brendan, you got any in that list?
Well, I'm sort of loath a little bit to call anyone downright useless for basically a lot of reasons. One is, I'm striving to be the imperfect Christian man that I am, but also I think there's a lot of media narrative and hype. It's hard to tell what's really going on half the time. And also people get shuffled around into positions that maybe they're not suited to by outsiders. It's not that they're choosing a portfolio or whatever. But the thing I would say is, I think Luxon for me has been a disappointment as a leader. Willis has not really performed strongly either. They've had moments. I would have added Bishop to that list, but I think what he said in the last week actually about housing affordability has really impressed me, actually, and it shows that maybe he's a bit more astute about the problems in New Zealand. Judith Collins, well, I think she was strong 10 years ago, but not anymore. But the one thing I would say is that I look at ACT and I feel like Karen Shaw is actually quite good. I feel she's more actually a New Zealand First MP, ironically. That's what she feels like at home to me. The ACT Party, apart from Seymour, they feel like they're missing in action and waning. Winston feels like he's growing, but the concern I have is what's behind Winston? Is there any more talent coming through? That's the concern I have.
Okay, and that was just one I was about to get to. Kiwi Toffee said, Shane Jones, I would suggest, is much, much more than good for a laugh. He's a man of substance in more ways than one. And I think, he might be the secret weapon, or maybe Winston's got another one. I'm not sure. So anybody on your, well, we won't say dud. We're not allowed to. We've got to be nice. Brendan's challenged us on that. So anybody who doesn't quite make the did a great job grade.
I actually felt stronger about who's been the dud. So Brendan's the lovely, nice Christian, and I'm a bit more scathing. So
we're not going to argue with you, Sue. Okay, go for it.
I'm an Australian. I'll call it as it is. Look, I've been really disappointed with Nicola Willis, and it's right up there. And I look at all the polls, and we often talk about the like you say, the argy-bargy and the race between the two Chris's, but no one has really done polling about between Nicola Willis and Barbara Edmonds. And interesting, Simon just brought up about qualifications. I think that finance is an area that needs expertise, and I'm just quite flabbergasted that Christopher Luxon has put her in that position. It started out with a lot of promise, But if you hear her in question time, she always is asked a question from her fellow MPs, and it's always a really long-winded words of nothingness, really. And I go, well, what are you saying? And where are you headed here? And it's all this all looks tidy, but really underneath. And Simon's talked about this before, that we're still borrowing really at high rates, and we're not really pulling the economy back, because we've got to be honest, New Zealand's financial state was really in dire straits before National came in. So yes, Nicola Willis. The other one was Paul Goldsmith. I've had a lot to do with him with this AI thing, trying to get a comparison, a law that's around the copyright, tightening it up to preempt AI. AI is here, but we still need to tighten our laws. But also what he did with the BSA, he's toothless. He's coming out and he's not saying anything, and he's almost like he's making a joke, and there's some sort of mockery about it, and I just don't think he's serious enough. So yeah. Oh, and Matt Ducey for his lack of action on puberty blockers. So they're my three duds. See, I feel very strongly about that, Bob.
Yeah. I don't think anybody hasn't got Ducey in their list. Although, who was the one you said just before that?
Paul Goldsmith.
Paul Goldsmith. Yeah. Minister of Broadcasting. Yeah, I think that was one of his roles, and he came into that because Melissa Lee stood down because she wouldn't help out the media. The government hasn't helped out the media, so nothing really changed. So I think she got treated appallingly. But anyway, Simon, who's not on your nice list?
Look, it's a very broad comment, and I hope this doesn't come across as uncharitable seeing I've left the place, but I think most haven't really fired. It's just a lack of direction. And unfortunately, I think that sits at the foot of the Prime Minister. I mean, some ministers just won't be competent regardless of who they are, but there just doesn't seem to be direction and purpose. And so a lot of them fall into this space. Sadly, I agree. Nicola Willis has not fired in finance. She just can't get her head around it, from what I can observe, and has completely lost the confidence across the board, which is unfortunate. Look, Ducey has completely sold out on the gender ideology and continues to put kids at risk. I mean, he's been sidelined now, and I'd expect him to be removed from cabinet in what's anticipated as a January reshuffle. This might come across as a bit paradoxical. It's not a dud. I want to be really clear. I think Mark Mitchell has done a great job. But the spin on this is he's been so successful is that law and order is no longer an issue in the public's eye. And this is the strange thing with politics, and it's why I'm showing it, because this is a real success story for the government. But it's so successful, no one's talking about it. If you look at the polls, law and order is not an issue anymore. Yeah. And so and again, it's not his fault. I really want to underline and bold that. He's done such a good job that it's now a non-issue, and therefore the benefits of the issue for the government have been lost. And the last one is, I'd actually say David Seymour. I actually don't know what the guy's achieved. Huge amount of time, cost, angst around the Treaty Principles Bill. His big thing has been his regulatory standards bill. No one really understands what that is. And his regulations, even struggling to think what it's even called. He set up some new regulations ministry, which no one really knows what it's doing because it hasn't really done anything, but is costing you, the taxpayer, an enormous amount of money. So I think he's a bit of a dud on that, or those fronts.
Yeah. Okay, Michael?
Oh, well, top of the list has to be Matt Ducey, who's a real doozy.
Well, he's from Christchurch. That's why, Michael.
Yeah, well, he's closer to where Brendan lives, actually.
Yes, he's my MP.
Oh, there we are. Is that why you're in Melbourne?
Yeah, that's why I'm in Melbourne.
So he's still waiting, Bob, to see which gender his kids are going to choose. And as others have said, he's just a disaster, really. And he's a smarmy sort of a character, it seems. And others have mentioned Paul Goldsmith. He's on my list. He seems a very affable and decent fellow, actually. But politically, he's 3/4 indecision and 1/4 hesitation. He stumbles along. and the BSA issue with the platform, I think, is particularly sad. He just hasn't spoken out about that at all. Many others have, but not the Minister of Broadcasting. So he's quite a disappointment. And as others have said, Christopher Luxon is a big disappointment for social conservatives. He behaves like a manager, which is his background, of course. He's not statesmanlike or skilled in statecraft. He just doesn't have the experience, really. And he just seems to just bleat on about growth and getting back on track, but he's not listening. He's just really not impressive at all. And I think, all of National were elected for real change. And Simon will tell us, real change in your first term in government's pretty hard. And some good things there, but he's just not impressive, Bob.
Okay, I'm going to quickly ask you, if you were the Prime Minister, what key change would you make in January? What key position would you make or change? My one is I would completely disband the Human Rights Commission, and I'd create a ministry for families where every bit of legislation is tested to check whether it actually strengthens families and marriage. But anyway, that's just me as Prime Minister. You don't have to vote for me. Just check. Leslie says, everyone can criticise the MPs in the coalition, but the Left Marxist Alliance will, well, let's hope could likely, not will, win the next election if the Conservatives don't come together now. So that is very true. Right. If you were Prime Minister, Brendan, would you make any change in January? Any key change?
To what, the cabinet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would. And some of them, like we've already heard some of the proposals here tonight, and I don't think any of those I disagree with. I actually like your idea, Bob. I really think we've actually got to break the shackles of liberalism, and the only way to do that is to recognise that the fundamental unit of society is not a radical, autonomous, self-choosing individual, but instead it is the family. And so you've actually got to get serious, and there's got to be policy, and there's got to be dedicated ministries to focus on that.
Yeah. Sue?
I'd dismantle the Ministry of Women. They don't know what one is, and it's a waste of time, really, because they're pandering to the trans agenda. So, and I'd also change out Nicola Willis. I think she is the weakest link in the whole coalition. See, strength.
Look, there's clearly some ministers we should move on. I mean, Matt Ducey is one of them. There's a bit of reshuffling that could be done. I mean, Nicola Willis shouldn't be in finance, but there is no way that Luxon will move her out. But what I think is needed more than a reshuffle is just a clear direction and vision from the senior leadership, and allowing ministers to actually get on with their jobs. And at the moment, that's just not happening. They're just not sure what to do. They're not clear what the direction is. And so you're seeing this halting dynamic. So until that changes, which I don't expect will, you're not going to see the performance that we expect.
No. Okay. And Michael?
Oh, well, Bob, I'd love to see the end of both TVNZ and RNZ. I think they should go. The Human Rights Commission, the Broadcasting Standards Authority, I think the local government reforms didn't go far enough. The profligate waste in local government is just appalling. And, I think the list could go on, Bob, but there we are.
Yeah.